Yeah. Watch your head down, yeah. Watch your head, watch your head down, just get. Watch your head, watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. Watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Watch your head. Man, ain't no way I'm finna listen to you spit with your PDF supporting eye for you finna get clipped. Idiot poses wise when truth approach you. Close your eyes, hold the lies, and show your pride is oversized in your replies. Trying to teach, but you only came to preach. Lying about Jesus, who you think you finna reach. In your speech, I hear the weakness, that's why you won't shut up. Demons in your ear convince you to be evil is what you disagree. It's history, too late to change it, it's a thing. Wins ain't free round here, bro. When you speak, I'm listening. So if you think you finna be hitting me with your wizardry, convincing me to give a free platform, you're tripping, G. I don't mince words, I don't get purrs who don't deserve the way. Why don't you learn? You've shown you've earned it, so deserve your fate and so discern what happened here, so you learn your place. I know it burned, but grow and turn from falsehood into grace. Watch your head down, yeah. Watch your head, watch your head. Watch your head down, just get. Watch your head, watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Just pay close attention, that hateful ambition is why you done failed your mission. Your faith is a prison that makes you a victim, that's why you ain't breaking my rhythm. You ain't finna get in, my spirit is sealed. Don't know your God, can't say if it's real. To me he sound awful like Satan for real, trying to convince me he made us to kill. What are you stupid? This is the war of the spirit, but you don't know it or walk it or live it. You don't see what's happening, you're walking into it. You're dead where it matters and lost and diluted. You can give pain, you can give hate, but don't wanna take it. That is your way, you will give hate because you love Satan. I'm not finna pause my day to listen to someone whose Lord is hate. I'm finna walk away. Yeah. Whoa. Watch your head down. Yeah. Watch your head. Watch your head. Watch your head down. Just get. Watch your head. Watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Watch your head.
What's going on, everybody? How you doing? How you doing? How you feeling? I appreciate everybody for joining me over here at The Word and I. God bless you. God bless you. Watch your head, dog. Watch your head. Watch your head. How y'all doing out there? How y'all doing? We here to discuss a topic that is, did Muhammad commit shirk? Did Muhammad participate in shirk? And I think it's a very interesting topic. I know my Muslim interlocutors will say differently, of course, but shirk, if you don't know, is associating partners with God. It's associating partners with God. It's basically what they all say that, you know, us Christians do when we confess the Holy Trinity, and that we are associating partners with God because they believe that God is a singular person, singular being. And if I'm making any, it's really three types of shirk. Is major shirk, you know, shirk akbar, then is other lower, lesser versions of shirk that I'm sure my Muslim counterpart will give us when we going through this rendition and in this discussion. Right now I have on stage with me is Prophet Daniel. Prophet Daniel, how you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you, brother. I'm doing fine. I'm doing well. Doing well. If any Muslims in the audience or Christians, if you want to sub to Prophet Daniel's YouTube channel, it's called Prophet Daniel Has Spoken. If you like what he present, if you feel like he has good arguments and such like that, you can follow Prophet Daniel over on YouTube at Prophet Daniel Has Spoken. You say they say that you have low audio. I don't know why that is. Low audio. Hold on. Say something now.
How's it coming now?
Is that better, y'all?
How's it coming now? Is it better?
Okay, they say it's good now.
Okay.
Okay. Within the discussion with me and you have a YouTube channel, so you can rip out any part of this discussion. You can post it on your YouTube channel. You know, Prophet Daniel, as you like. I don't do any strikes or anything. I won't strike your YouTube channel or nothing like that. You know, if you use any parts of this discussion for your own audience, you know, so.
Sure.
So you have my consent. Yeah, you have my consent, and you can post it on your YouTube channel. Right now, if you already with us, everybody in the audience, go ahead and hit the like button. The more you like the stream, the more people will come and enjoy the discussion between me and Brother Daniel. Is that Daniel's your real name?
No, Masood is my real name.
Okay, Mr. Masood, but I just call you Daniel because that's what you.
Yeah, that's fine. Daniel is good.
Okay, no problem. Now, so we're gonna jump right into it. I got a couple of things that I can bring up to see if you agree with Muhammad committing shirk, or did he participate in shirk? Knowingly or unknowingly, did he do this, right? So the first one is going to be very simple, very basic, and then we'll go up you know, in increments to see. I'll present more and more arguments to you to see how you deal with them. Okay. Do you have anything to say before we start?
No, we can start.
Okay, let me present my screen. Everything that I bring, I'm gonna put it on the screen for you so you can see it. Okay, right here. This is Sahih Muslim 1765. Sahih Muslim 1765. Kind of a lengthy hadith, but if you got time, I'll read it all, but the most important part is at the bottom. But for context, I'll read it all to you. That's fine with you?
Yeah, since you're bringing out hadith, can I say something?
Sure.
Okay, I'm of the opinion that to be a good Christian, you don't have to believe in Paul or his apostleship or his writings. You can be a good Christian by just believing in the Gospels. So in order to be a good Christian, you're required to believe in the Quran. And writings that appear later, sometimes hundreds of years later, they are not implied for faith. So God never requested people to believe in the writings that come up later on. So even if we spend our lifetime sort of falsifying the hadith, at the end of the day, we would not have done anything to falsify the Quran at all. So in order to falsify the Quran and Islam, the Quran is the document that we got to be dealing with directly. And if we manage to falsify the Quran, that would be the undoing of Islam. And it's not the other way around.
Okay, so from what I'm getting out, reading between the lines, you're saying that some of the hadiths could be contradictory or not true. And if we deem them or find faults in them, that doesn't automatically, discredit Islam and the Quran as a whole.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, do you accept hadith?
I'm not required to accept hadith as part of my belief or faith in God. So what is important for a Muslim is to believe that the Quran is the word of God, and God had previously given other books to other prophets. That's what we are required to believe. So Quran will be the end of it. There is no other book or narration or a story after the Quran that people as Muslim believers are required to believe.
Okay, who told you that as Christians we are required to believe in the Quran?
No, not as Christians, as Muslims.
Oh, as Muslims. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I misheard you, because I thought you said as a Christian we are
No,
required to.
what I said prior to that was, as a Christian, in order to be a good Christian, you're required to believe in the Gospels, not in the apostleship of Paul or his writings. That's what I said.
Okay, but the Apostle Paul's writings is part of the Bible.
I understand. I understand the Christian doctrine to have developed from Paul's ministry. But as a Christian, in my opinion, in my understanding, in order to be a good Christian, you are not required to believe in Paul or his writings or his apostleship. You can be a very good Christian by being a believer in the gospel accounts. And the same applies for the Muslim. In order to be a good Muslim, if you believed in the Quran, that will suffice you. You don't have to go out and believe the other writings that have come later on after the Quran.
Okay. See, whereas being a Christian, I will have to fundamentally disagree with you about Paul, because Paul specifically, Jesus appeared to Paul specifically, and he himself told him that he was going to utilize him as a utensil, so to say, as a speaker or as an apostle for the Gentiles, to bring the Gentiles to the fold of Christianity. And many of us that are Christian today are not Jewish by ethnicity. So we get grafted in because we are Gentiles through a great part of Paul's ministry. Paul's ministry is what actually reached further outside of Jerusalem to the Gentile nations, that Jesus said that he was going to use him to bring us within the fold of spiritual Israel. So yes, we do have to believe in Paul, because Paul is the very vehicle, that brought us most of our gospel, or the gospel to us from Jesus through Paul. So yeah, we do have to believe in Paul.
Yeah, that could be your understanding. But in my understanding, even the first disciples of Christ, who were not with Paul, for example, James himself, remained a good Christian, not having to believe in Paul's apostleship, or not having to be an associate of Paul. So you can be a good Christian even without associating with Paul. But if you do, I can understand the sentiment, because Paul went on to do a great ministry for the teachings. I mean, for the teachings of Christ. Like, he did a great service in extending those teachings to the Gentile world. So I can see the sentiment, being a Gentile, to have that sentiment. I can understand and I can respect that. But to be a good Christian, you are not required as such. That's my position.
Okay, you can have that, and we can broach that topic later if you like. But
Sure.
For now, we're gonna read this hadith real quick. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Said it has been narrated on authority of Abu Hurairah, who said, "If you want to, are you gonna reject this hadith? Because I can go straight to your Quran. I won't even waste time with this."
Yeah, exactly. Let's go to the Quran, because as I said, hadiths are spurious literature that have come about hundreds of years later. So there's no point in delving in them and trying to falsify the Quran. It's just
Okay.
not applied.
Sure. Let's go to Surah 9. So I'm gonna lay a foundation, a basis for this first, and we can see what constitutes shirk according to your Quran, right? And even your prophet himself.
Okay.
All right. 931 says, they have taken their rabbis and monks, I'm pretty sure you know this verse, as well as the Messiah, son of Mary, as lords besides Allah, even though we were commanded to worship none but one God. There is no God worthy of worship except him. Glorified is he above what they associate with him. Right? So the Jews and the Christians, this is talking about the Jews and the Christians, right? We have taken our rabbis and monks as lords besides the Messiah. You know, I'm not going to make that claim yet, but I know a lot of people do. That actually the Messiah is actually equated with Allah, separate from the rabbis and monks. You know, but I'm not making that claim right now. All right. So if we go to the commentaries on 931, we'll see exactly, and this is the commentary of Ibn Kathir on 931. Do you discredit Ibn Kathir?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't take from Ibn Kathir either?
No.
Why is that?
I think he is not even a modern scholar. Like, he's from the medieval times, and in Middle Ages, people really had limited understanding of many things, not just the Quran, but many things. Their understanding of the natural world itself was so bleak. I hope I'm right in pulling this out. Ibn Kathir goes on to say that the earth is resting on a veil or something like that.
Oh, well,
so, so you can imagine the quality of his scholarship and his knowledge of the natural world. It's very bleak, and it's not credible. So he couldn't be a credible authority to have a say on the Quran. But I will be interested to see what he says in this regard.
You know, most of the time Ibn Kathir actually quotes different sources for why he makes an exegesis on a certain passage, right? So he's not actually doing this, you know, from his own interpretation. This is how earlier people interpreted these passages.
Again, he's quoting a lot of hadith. That's fine. We can see what he says about it.
I think you will agree. I think you will agree, because do you agree that the Christians took their rabbis and monks as lords because we listened to them?
So what do you specifically understand to be the meaning of that verse? What is the meaning of taking them as lords?
That we made them ruler, and we abided by what the standards and the laws that they passed down to us, instead of going directly to the scriptures and see what God made halal or haram for us.
Excellent. I agree with you.
Okay, so you agree with Ibn Kathir as well, then, because this is what Ibn Kathir says.
I agree. That's the meaning. That's the meaning imparted in that verse.
Right. So you agree with Ibn Kathir. So on this point, you shouldn't have to reject.
If that is what Ibn Kathir has said, obviously I agree with that, because that's exactly what the Quran is saying. The Quran is saying to the Jews and the Christians that they have that they refer to their rabbis and monks as authoritative on equal footing with God.
Exactly.
So if God says something and the rabbi says something, even though it may contradict what God says, people would be like, okay, the rabbi said it and we are done and dusted. Like, the rabbi said it, and so we have to obey, or we have to listen. Or if the rabbi said it, that's correct. That can't be wrong. So that kind of a stubborn attitude to be a diehard fan of the rabbi is what is being critiqued here.
Right. So we adhered and listened to the rabbis over the commands of Allah and what the scripture says. Okay, so let me read this for you, because you don't disagree with Ibn Kathir on this point. See,
Okay.
it says they took their rabbis and their monks, they're repeating the verse, as lords besides Allah. Adi commented, I said, they did not worship them. So Adi, he's saying, we don't worship our rabbis and monks. We don't think they're God or anything, right?
Yeah.
So this is what the prophet said. The prophet said, yes, they did. They, rabbis and monks, prohibited the allowed for them, the Christians and the Jews, and allowed the prohibited, and they obeyed them. This is how they worship them. The messenger of Allah said to Adi, right? So
Okay.
once they prohibited or made haram halal or halal haram for us, this is how we worship them. And that will be shirk, correct?
I may not agree with that hadith that you're presenting there. I mean, Ibn Kathir is talking about. I don't think that hadith to be a valid hadith or it's even relevant because it sort of narrows down the connotation of the verse. The meaning that's important in the verse is now being narrowed down here to making things that were prohibited as allowed and making things that were allowed as prohibited. So it's narrowing down this hadith. The citation of this hadith is narrowing down on the meaning of the verse itself. So therefore, I do not agree with that hadith to be explaining the verse at all.
Oh, so you don't believe, but they have the same interpretation as you did.
I mean the interpretation that the rabbis were, the people were considering the rabbis and the monks as final authority over and above the words of God. That interpretation is correct. But the citation of the hadith narrows down the meaning to making things that were prohibited as lawful and lawful things as prohibited. That sort of limits the connotation of that verse.
So you don't believe that we did this?
I don't agree that that hadith was the backdrop of that verse. I don't agree with that.
So what do you think that was the backdrop of this verse?
There is another literal allele in the Quran dealing with this particular theme, and that is in chapter 3 verse 64. A similar sort of phrase comes out. God says, do not tell them that they will not consider their scholars as lords besides God. So if you open that verse 364, you have an allele there, a literary allele there. So you can comprehend the meaning better.
So you wouldn't consider yourself as a Sunni Muslim?
I believe making divisions in religion, not just in Islam, but even in Christianity, is a grave sin, and people will be punished for that. God will punish people for dividing religion. Even Jesus warned people not to divide religion. And if people do
So
that,
where do you get your
God,
right? So what do you use to get your interpretation for verses? If you don't accept Ibn Kathir, if you don't accept Hadith, if you don't accept anything really outside of the Quran, then how do you interpret verses? You just go by your own understanding, or what?
The Quran says it has explained itself, and the Quran says time and again, we have made the Quran easy for you to understand. Will you not comprehend? So the Quran, not just the Quran, even the Gospels, they go on to declare, even though disciples had difficulty understanding the parables of Christ, but the teachings of Christ are, they do emphasize that you have to understand the teachings on their face value, for what they stand, for what they are, without needing an external source to impart
Right.
understanding.
But you know,
Yeah.
3:7 says that some verses are mutashabahat, like you don't know them, right?
It's
So how do
that's
you
correct.
like how do you gauge which ones are mutashabahat or which ones are actually clear and concise that you yourself can know how to interpret these things?
So we know the language contains similes and metaphors. So the metaphorical verses are allegorical. It may not be really clear for common people, but the fundamental message of the Quran is clear for common people. That's the saying of the Quran. The Quran says the Quran is very clear and it has the fundamental message which all people can understand without needing external help. But things that are allegorical in it, metaphorical in it, common people may have trouble understanding those. So, but it goes on to say, people who are knowledgeable, people who pursue knowledge, they will understand those allegorical verses better than the common people.
Right. So everyone is not going to be able to understand everything in the Quran. So you would have to
It's
appeal to those that actually learned and studied,
yeah,
right? To help guide you on the along the way to actually get the meaning, the deepest allegorical meaning out of some of these verses, which means you will have to appeal to scholars because
and
they
that,
studied these.
that does not guarantee the scholars immunity. The scholars are still falsifiable. I mean, the scholars can still be wrong. You can't grant them the immunity of like, okay, what if they have said something that's 100% true? So there is no such guarantee to any scholars. So scholars are human beings after all, and they can make mistakes.
But given the probability of them spending basically almost their entire
Well,
lives studying this Quran, studying the verses, going back to maybe even previous scholars and seeing what they interpreted these mutashabahat or whatever verses or even clear verses of the Quran, then given the probability of such, that means you probably should take what they're saying because
we can consider and see what they have said, but what they have said can also be criticized and replaced with a better understanding. You know what I mean? So they may have said things that are credible. That's possible, but they may have also said things that are not accurate
but
or not appropriate or
who's to
not correct.
decide? Who's going to decide that?
Everybody. I mean, every age, every society. When they have a life on earth, it's their turn to understand the scriptures of God and make best meaning for themselves. And they can go back to the previous societies in different eras or periods in the past in history and see and contemplate on what people have done in the past with respect to those passages of the Quran, but they are not obliged to take them on their face value.
So
They
if you
reserve
have
the
a
right.
different
They reserve the right to
right, so
criticism.
if you have a different interpretation from the next man, how y'all gonna distinguish who's have the right interpretation? Because right now it's like you're saying every man for themselves. Every man, it depends on who you want. If you want to believe this scholar, you can take it with a grain of salt. If you don't, so if I have a different understanding from you, and if the Quran is clear as you say, then there shouldn't be too much deviation between the two. But if two Muslims are actually reading the same verses and they coming up with totally different conclusions of what they're reading, who's going to be the deciding factor? Because is the
I
Quran
will give you
actually
an
clear then?
analogy. I will give you an analogy. So there is this classical physics, and there is conventional physics, the modern day physics. Many of the laws that are documented in classical physics have been updated today. Like, for example, the classical view on space time. The classical view of a theory of relativity, but Einstein came along and he demonstrated special relativity. So people in the past, they could have had their understanding of the scriptures, but they have to stand the test of time. Anything that they have said or commentated or annotated the scriptures with their understanding should stand the test of time. If it doesn't stand the test of time, a new body of knowledge can go and override it. So a new body of knowledge who can better substantiate explanation or understanding, they can go and override what has been said of the past.
But if we see these people that's closer to Muhammad, right, and explicate what Muhammad meant by these verses, because Ibn Kathir, he quoted, you know, a hadith and saying that this is what came out of Muhammad's mouth himself from an earlier source, right? So if this scholar is actually quoting something that came out of your prophet's mouth, then we're not going to take that. He's lying about that too.
Okay, so Abu Bakr is the closest friend of the Prophet. And the amount of hadith Abu Bakr has narrated are not more than 25, not more than a couple of dozen. And even in those narrations, every time Abu Bakr has quoted Prophet, he has used the phrase in the Arabic, "Aw kama qal," which means something similar. Prophet said something similar to what I'm telling you. So even he, the closest friend of the Prophet, is not quoting him verbatim. He's not saying, I am telling you exactly what Prophet has said. He's telling, Prophet has said something like this. So you can imagine a man who stuck to the Prophet day and night is not quoting him verbatim. And he has quoted, in effect, not more than a couple of dozen hadith. But the later hadith narrators, they have narrated hundreds and thousands of sayings in the name of the Prophet. I don't know where they sourced that from. And the companions of Prophet Muhammad, the closer ones, they are the ones who documented the Qur'an, but they did not feel the need to document the hadith. And I wonder why. If hadith was super important, if hadith actually explained the Qur'an, I wonder why these his close companions who documented the Qur'an did not document the hadith. I wonder why.
But this causes a problem. This fundamentally causes a problem for Muslims, because
it does not.
Yeah, because you don't know how to pray 5 times a day without the hadiths. You don't know Muhammad's wives without the hadiths. You don't know anything personal about Muhammad without the hadiths. All you know is the Quran, and if you speak the Quran, right? If you just stick to the Quran, you don't even really know when Ramadan is. You don't know any of these things without external sources other than your Quran. Silv, the link is at the top of the chat, bro. It's pinned at the top of the chat. Yeah, so it's like now you're just picking and choosing which hadiths you want to follow, or which scholar you want to follow, which leaves you on a slippery slope, because what it says, if you don't, did Muhammad die?
Okay, so you don't have to know all of those sort of things.
No, I'm just asking you, theoretically, did Muhammad die?
Yeah, of course he died.
How do you know he died?
Because he's not alive anymore.
But how do you know he died?
Well, if a person is alive, he's alive. If a person is not alive, that means he's dead.
But how do you know? I mean, it doesn't say it
in
your
Quran.
What do you mean? Because
we know that people
dead.
don't live.
Isa's not
we know
dead.
People don't live more than 100 years, or just for a factual thing. People don't live more than 200 years or anything like that. So since the Quran is 1400 years now, and clearly, he's not alive anymore. So what I'm trying to clarify is, you don't need the hadith to explain the Quran. The Quran is self-explanatory, And you don't need the hadith to learn how to pray or observe the month of Ramadan or Hajj or any other thing, because the Quran also explains the prayers, by the way, for you. Okay, I will just touch an important facet of the prayers, an argument which people can make in defense of hadith. Prayers are practiced 5 times a day, and ever since it was instituted or established in the masjid, individuals may have missed prayers, but in the masjid, the tradition of praying or has never gone missing. Like, people have always prayed in the masjid every day, on every occasion. So people who attend to the mosque, they know how to pray, not because they're reading the hadith, but because there is a tradition already established and people have been praying. So you don't need the hadith per se to teach people how to pray. That's never been the case. I pray myself. I never learned my prayers from the hadith. That's not how it was. So that's just untrue. To say you need hadith in order to learn the prayer is just a fallacious argument.
So how many times you pray and this and that, they didn't have to get that from hadith.
Yeah, it's a fallacious argument.
We'll go on. Can you read this 17:1 for me?
Do you want to touch 364, or we will go back to it?
We'll go back to it. We'll go, because you led us down this road. You know what I'm saying? And we'll bring this to a conclusion. Then we'll go back to 360. Yeah, okay. 364.
Okay. Do you want me to read the English?
Yeah, you can go ahead and read the English, but don't read the brackets because that's not in the Arabic. Oh, you go ahead and read the Arabic. Go ahead and read the Arabic.
Okay, I'll read the Arabic. So it says, because the audience would not understand Arabic, yeah. I would read the English. Okay. So, glory be to the one who took his servant Muhammad by night from the sacred mosque to the furthest mosque, whose surroundings we have blessed, so that we may show him some of our signs. Indeed, he alone is the all-hearing, all-seeing.
Right. Now, this is a couple things within this verse. Muhammad is not mentioned in the Arabic. Muhammad is not. Yeah. It says his servant in the Arabic.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also the sacred mosque and the furthest mosque. How would you know any of this without the hadith? How would you know that this is talking about Muhammad without a hadith or a tafsir or something that's telling you that this is about Muhammad? Because everyone is God's servant.
Okay. So the Quran is actually focused on Prophet Muhammad, right? On this individual. So the Quran is being given to him, given to this particular individual, correct? So in that context, when you read the Quran, so you can identify who it is. Not just on this occasion, but on several different occasions, the Quran uses the pronoun to refer to the Prophet, not just on this occasion. So when I read this, so it says, Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi. So God says, glory be to the one
mm-hmm.
who took his servant, okay, on a journey, right?
Right.
So who is that servant?
Who is that servant? That's
who's that servant, right?
Yeah,
who's that servant? So who can that be? Who can that be?
It could be at that point in time. It can be a whole bunch of different servants, because
it can't. It couldn't be anyone other than Prophet Muhammad. Right?
Okay, let's see. Because if you go to 17:2,
yeah,
who is the next person he's talking about? And we gave Moses the scripture and made it a guide for the children of Israel.
Yeah.
So that could be talking about Moses.
But Moses was not in Mecca at that time.
Who said this was Mecca? Who said that this had to be in Mecca?
Okay, there are two places.
According to your tradition, Abraham built other mosque. Right, it was other mosques, even in Jerusalem, even in other places. This wasn't the only mosque. In mosque wasn't only existing in Mecca. Mosque was everywhere. So how do you know even what mosque is the furthest mosque? What mosque is the farthest mosque from this? You don't know.
Okay, you have to know a bit of tradition here. So the Quran is not the
Tradition
first of the
outside of, hold
communication.
on, tradition outside of your Quran?
Yeah,
So where do you get the tradition from?
Israelites.
What? What? But you just
Yeah.
said it couldn't be talking about Moses, though. Is it Moses and the
No,
Israelite?
just let me complete. So God has been talking to lots of prophets prior to Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so we get a very good account of it in the stories of the Quran when it talks about Moses and David and Solomon and Jesus and many other prophets of Israel. So we get a very good idea of the first temple that Solomon built and the establishment of first temple and all of that sort of stuff. And we also get to learn from the Quran that God had Abraham and Ishmael build the Kaaba. Okay, so you have these two references. One is to the temple, the Davidic kingdom, the temple that Solomon built, and the other one is the temple that Abraham and Ishmael built in
How do you know that
Makkah.
it was built by Ishmael
Hold
and
on,
Isaac?
real quick. Hey, John, are you a Muslim? Put it in the private chat. If you're a Muslim, put it in the private chat. I'll bring you on stage. If not, we're just looking for Muslim.
He's a Sunni. He's a
Oh,
Sunni.
okay. He says
He
yes.
wants to come and cook.
Okay. Go ahead, Sylv. By the way, salam alaikum, brother. Good to see you.
Salam al-Masih, brother. God bless you, man. Thank you for bringing me over here. But yeah, my question is, since you brought you made that claim that it was Isaac and Ishmael are the ones that actually built the Mecca. Now the question is, how do you know? Where do you get these information? From where? Because the Quran doesn't talk
Abraham and
about it.
Ishmael. You mean to say Abraham and Ishmael?
Yeah,
Oh,
Abraham
okay.
and
I thought
Ishmael.
you said Isaac, but go ahead. Yeah, Abraham and Ishmael.
Oh, I may have misspelled if that's what you heard. Yeah, it's Abraham and Ishmael.
Okay.
So we learn that from the Quran.
Where does
That
it say that?
Abraham. I don't remember the exact verse, but if you can help me to pull that verse out, we can look into that.
Let me tell you,
So-
what if I tell you that the verse does not even exist in the Quran? Nowhere in the Quran it says that Abraham and Ishmael built the Mecca.
He built the Kaaba. It says that they built the house. They resurrected. I mean, and erected the house, but it doesn't say the Kaaba.
Okay, it doesn't have to use a noun because it's understood. What house was that? Okay.
No, but hold on, you're Qurani, right? I mean, so we're taking you as what the Quran says. You can't go outside of the Quran, right? This is what you've been doing. You've been rejecting every hadith, even though that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he was the closest, because you already said it, he was the closest companion to your Prophet. Not only him, Ibn Abbas, the cousin of the Prophet, and his student is Mujahid, which we have is authentic ahadith that traces back. This is why, the Sunnah have the chain of narration, what's so-called the chain of narration that traces back. Now, even if I ask you another question, because I don't want to deflect, but anyways, if I ask you this, who compiled the Quran? Why do you trust this Quran? Based on what do you trust this Quran? You will say, well, the people, the companions that actually compiled it. But wait a minute.
How do you know that?
Where do you get
that
these
wouldn't be my
information?
answer.
Why do you trust that?
That would not be my answer.
What is your answer then?
My answer would be another verse of the Quran which says, "Wa inna lahu lahafidhun." So God has the process of protecting it. God has the process of bringing that protection.
so
okay,
God-
so
So
But
God
who
was playing the
protected
quarterback?
it? Who protected it?
God can use anyone as the instrument, but
Okay, but who was the
the
anyone?
the
This-
end result is God has protected it because of what God says, right?
Yeah, but
So
why would you
God could
trust-
use
hold on,
instruments,
hold
whether
on.
Muslim or non-Muslim. It doesn't really matter.
Follow your logic. Let me follow your logic. Why do you trust what the Quran says? Based on what? This was my question. If you're going to go to the Quran just because of the Quran, what it says, when lahu hafidhun, just like how you mentioned, and there's memorizers that actually memorize the Quran. Based on what do you trust the Quran? Again, you haven't even given me the answer. Based on what do you trust the Quran? What if I just told you that what if it was some random person that actually wrote the Quran and compiled it and gave it to everybody?
Okay. Okay. Based on what criteria do I trust the Quran is your question, correct? So my answer to that question is, when I contemplated on the Quran actually challenged me to find errors in it and be critical of it. And my extensive studies of the Quran have sort of have convinced me of its voice being the voice of God, rather than any human involvement
How do
in
you
it.
know?
That's how I have been convinced by my own studies of the scripture.
So you go based on your own
Your own
interpretation. You go based
interpretation.
on your own self. So you made your own self a prophet that was chosen by whoever that was. You know what I mean? And you
So,
the
okay,
book came
just to
up to you, and
clarify,
that's
I'm
it.
not calling myself a prophet. That would be
I'm
that
not
would
saying
be
that you're calling
incorrect.
it. I'm not saying that you're calling yourself a prophet, but you made yourself look like a prophet because you're saying, "Well, it's just because I
No,
was." Hold on, it's just because I was convinced of it. I read it. That's it. I know that this book is from God. So
I,
basically, what
I
you're
will
saying
give
is
you
that
the
you made
justification.
yourself look like a prophet.
I will give you the justification. The justification is because God will hold me as an individual responsible on the day of judgment. So he will hold me alone as responsible for my faith, my actions. None other than me will be held responsible for my faith and my actions and my convictions. So I'm responsible for myself.
Yeah, but
But
how
how
do
do
you
you know
trust this
Therefore,
this?
Quran? Based on what?
Yeah,
Based on what do you
Daniel.
trust this Quran that is
Like,
truly from
right?
God?
What Silver's saying? How do you know that this Quran haven't been changed?
what I'm saying is, I have been convinced after the studies of the
I
Quran.
mean, I
But if
know,
there is
I
evidence,
know you've been
but if there is,
convinced. I'm
Argument from
saying,
silence.
what type of evidence do you have that this Quran haven't been changed?
Can I help the brother out?
Real quick, are you a
I would
Quran
like,
only?
I would like
No,
to
no, I'm
see the
Muslim.
counter
I'm
evidence.
Muslim.
I would like to
If you're Quran
see. I
only,
would like
that's
to see.
Islam.
Hold on, real quick, Daniel. I'm sorry. What'd you say, John?
I was saying, if you're Quran only, you basically reject the Hadith and Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, so I don't think you're Muslim.
That's Daniel. He
Yep.
rejects hadith.
Yep, because the Quran says to obey Allah and obey the Prophet. So how do you obey the Prophet? By going to the Hadith.
Yep, I'm
By
with the Christians on this one, brother.
wait,
You
is
don't
that
obey
you?
the
Is
Prophet
that you,
going back
John?
to the Hadith. That's just
It's
incorrect.
me, King. How you doing, King?
Habibi, I'm good, man. Good to see you. How you doing, man?
You too, brother. You too, man. Good, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
See
So go ahead, Daniel.
your understanding of obeying the Prophet through the Hadith is incorrect. That's not. You don't obey the Prophet through the Hadith. You obey the Prophet when he was alive and he was giving you instruction.
Okay.
That's
So what
what
does
is
it mean? What does
obedience
it
of the
mean, the
Prophet.
Sunnah? When it's the Prophet says the Sunnah, what does that mean?
That's what you think.
That's
I don't
what I
have to
think, or generations of
necessarily
scholars.
adopt your thought process.
That's
My
what I
thought
think, brother.
process
Or
is, when the Prophet was alive and he gave instructions to the people, and the people were required to obey him. That's what obedience to the Prophet means. The Quran also says, "Atiu Allah wa atiu Rasula wa ulul amri minkum." After the Prophet has been gone, the Quran has opened the channel of obedience. They have to follow and obey their leaders
okay.
who have authority over them. So the Quran says, "Wa ulul amri minkum." So people who have authority over there, their authorities, and people are supposed to be obeying their authorities.
Okay, so this is why I think you didn't want to answer the questions for our two friends here, because they trapped you. Because if you don't, because the same sanad, obviously there's oral tradition, and we have the sanad of the Prophet. So we have the chain of narration. So if you're saying, okay, you trust the Quran, obviously نحن نزلنا عليك الكتاب, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we will preserve this book. Allah says, right? You should have used that Quranic ayah number one. Number two, it was the same sanad that we have that hadith. So it's funny. So you rejecting hadith is very unusual to me. I've only met maybe one or two Quranics my whole life. So the prayer, so many things are in hadith that that's not in the Quran that explains the Quran. It's part of Wahi.
Maybe you were not in the stream earlier. I just provided an explanation of how you don't need hadith to
Yeah,
do
I
things
wasn't.
such
I
as
just
prayers
came
in
behind you.
Ramadan. Maybe you were not in the stream. You can always go back and look at how I answered that in the stream.
Okay.
Yeah, but the thing what we're saying is, just like 17:1, which I had just brought you, how do you know that this is Muhammad? How do you know this is talking about Muhammad?
Well, it's very evident, okay? But if you have difficulty, you have to tell me why it is not Muhammad, why it is somebody else.
Because it could be somebody else, because it just says a servant, and we know
Okay,
all of
then
the
you will have to
prophets.
make your case for somebody else. I mean, I don't
I
have to
just showed
necessarily
you.
make a case for someone else because
I
according
just
to
showed
my
you.
reading, it is.
Okay, and I showed you that the very next verse it mentions Moses. It
Yeah, the
mentions
reason
Moses
being,
in the very next verse. Doesn't mention any other prophet or another servant. It says, and is a conjunction leading on from the first verse. And we gave Moses the scripture and made it a guide for the Christian children of Israel. So
Watch
very
this.
well, naturally, just reading the flow of these verses and it's going back to the first verse, combining the two, you can automatically or just naturally assume that this could be talking about Moses. But without the hadiths, you don't know that this is actually talking about Muhammad.
Without the mufassirin, yep. Watch
to
this,
be
the
honest
Lord and
with
I.
you,
Watch this.
when
Daniel.
Let
Daniel.
him.
I never understood the way you are trying to make the case. Yeah.
No, what he's saying is that the next verses is showing you that this is talking about Moses. It never mentions that the servant is Muhammad. That's the whole point. Why? Because you're Qur'an, you can't go to the Mufassirin. But now let me go with your logic. Let me just follow your logic real quick. What if I tell you that this is talking about my ancestor? How can you disprove me wrong? Disprove me.
I don't have to disprove you. If you're making a case for someone else, it's the onus of justifying is on you, not on me.
No, it's not on me. It's on you because you're the one that is making the claim. You're the one that is saying, well, no, this is talking about Muhammad. But at the same time, we're asking you to demonstrate that and to prove. How do you know? But then you're not giving us a legit answer. So what I'm doing is I'm flipping the argument against you. And I'm telling you, no, this is talking about my ancestor. How can you disprove me then?
So when you look into the verse, now look, you look into the verse, okay? Let me read that to you once again, okay? I will. Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi.
You need the hadith. You could tag me in if you want, man.
Well, look, you can have your thoughts. You're free to have them, but I'm also entitled to have my own thoughts and my opinion about it, okay? So the verse very clearly reads to me, it's glory be to God who took his servant on a journey in the night from the sacred mosque to the furthest mosque, which God has blessed its frontiers, to show him the signs, our signs, which is God's signs. And God, he is all hearing and all seeing. So when I read this in its context for what it says, it's easy for me to understand that God actually took his servant Muhammad from this sacred mosque to the furthest mosque to show him the sum of his signs.
But it doesn't
And
say
God is
Muhammad. It doesn't say Muhammad though, Daniel.
But it's okay. That's correct. I understand you. Muhammad is not
because
named there.
I said, if you read the very next verse, it says, and we gave Moses. So
now let me tell you the context of the next verse. So once Prophet Muhammad has been taken to this place which God has blessed which he calls the furthest mosque, then God tells a story of Israelites. He says, وَآتَيْنَا Musa, and we had given Moses al-kitaba, the book, وَجَعَلْنَاهُ هُدًى لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ, and made it a guide to the children of Israel in this place in Jerusalem, in the furthest mosque. Okay, so I don't necessarily see a problem as such, guys, but you're free to have your opinions on it, and I'm entitled to mine.
Well, naturally, you're not going to have a problem with it because you're leaning on your own interpretation of this verse.
So what? It's not, because I'm responsible to God for my faith and conviction.
Right. But the thing is, you're already baking in your assumption that it's talking about Muhammad without any evidence to actually back up your assumption that this is about Muhammad. The only way that you can provide any tertiary or secondary substance or evidence for your interpretation that this is about Muhammad is you have to go to the Tafsir or either a hadith that explains this, because like I said, like Sylv said, how do you know? What if he said it was about his servant? Or how do we know it's not about Moses? Because directly Moses is mentioned right after this verse. So you're just going off your own understanding without actual evidence to provide that what you're saying is true.
I can tell you why it is not Moses. Because Moses did not travel between two different sacred places.
Well, according to the Jews, he did.
Two different sacred places.
According to, is it in the Talmud or is it the Legend of the Jews? I think it's in the Legend of the Jews. Moses actually did travel in between two places, and because this is talking about the Islam Mirage that he went up and he talked to God. He was transported.
Two sacred places on earth. Moses did not travel between two sacred places on earth.
So you do know what story I'm talking about according to Moses in the other outside. I can't think. I'm drawing a blank. It's either in the Talmud or in the Legend of the Jews. One of the two. And it says that Moses did take a journey up to talk to God. Just similar.
The journey is between. That's a heavenly journey. That's a cosmic or celestial journey. It's got nothing to do with earthly journey. This verse talks about two different places on planet Earth.
But in this same thing in the Tafsir, it says Muhammad took this journey as well. This is the Islam Miraj, the night journey that he took. But you don't take from that. You don't take from that. So
you have to stick to the Qur'an and understand for what it is. Rather than
now you're trying to now you're trying to force me to take your interpretation from it, your methodology from it. You saying I have to stick to the Quran. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If I have to just stick to the Quran, then reading this verse, I don't know what servant it is, because all of the prophets were servants of Allah, right? And if it don't give me exact, verbatim that it was Muhammad, then I can be led to think this is about any of the prophets, especially Moses, because Moses is the next servant that is mentioned in verse 2. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
okay.
Even
if you were
that do have to go, brother.
Moses?
Oh, you gotta go, Sil.
I do have to go, yeah.
All right, appreciate it, man.
Nice
Go do your thing on your live, bro.
Of course, brother. God bless you. Daniel, please, what's it called? Listen to what the word and I is saying and what I actually said. Because if you're going to stay Qur'ani, trust me, like, just to be respectful, I'm not trying to be any disrespectful to you. You will get refuted every single time. And I'm just being
I would be happy to I would be happy to have a conversation with you on my channel or your channel anytime.
No problem, brother. God bless you guys.
Yeah,
God bless you. God bless you.
Daniel, bro, at this point, you're cooked, bro. I'll be honest. They're 100% right. I have to agree with them.
So,
you have no dalil against this.
Well, if you have, you can prove it, or you can keep it to yourself. I'm happy with my understanding of the verses.
Can I ask you a question, if it's okay with the host? So Ibn Kathir, all these scholars, Tafsir Sa'di, who quote hadith, Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, Ibn Taymiyyah, you just don't follow them? You just ignore all their work? Just out of curiosity, but like asking friendly question.
Yeah, I actually clarified my position on those things in the beginning of the stream, so I would recommend you to go back and watch the stream in the beginning. Okay. Not having to repeat myself here.
No problem.
I'll summarize it for you. He don't take from the Ibn Kathir or the Hadiths, or because those men are fallible. Basically, that's what he believes. So if it doesn't come strictly from the Quran, then he doesn't accept it. He goes off his own interpretation of these verses because the Quran claims that it's a clear book and it should be easy to understand, and he feels like he got the capabilities to understand the Quran clearly, so that's what he does. Did I formulate that correct, Daniel?
Absolutely, you nailed it. You nailed it.
Okay.
I appreciate it. SubhanAllah.
So do you want to go back to verse 364?
Okay, we was talking about
So Daniel, are you going to admit that you have no answer with just the Quran? Just kidding. This is weird.
I did not understand you, John. Can you repeat yourself?
I was saying, are you going to at least admit that here you have no answer without the hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? You have no answer.
No,
to give them.
I did not say that. I
Except
did not
for
concede.
You gave the homemade tafsir that this is my understanding and this is how I learned and this is what I have, and you didn't give like a proof or a dalil or a source. At least I didn't hear it.
No, I just said to you it couldn't be Moses because Moses did not travel between two sacred places on planet Earth. I just told you that.
Okay, sorry, I missed that part then.
Okay.
But he's still making an assumption that it's Muhammad without the verse saying it.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. See, look,
that's fine.
No, look, this is the important bit that I wanted to actually tell. I just forgot in a minute. I just remembered it now. The important point being, even if it is, say, suppose some people believe that to be Moses, okay, that has got nothing to, that will not discredit their faith in God, or it is not detrimental. Even if you believe that the servant is Moses, it is not detrimental to your faith.
Okay, hey, anybody in the audience, if y'all, I know Andrew, I know you good at pulling sources. If you can you find me that source? Well, he agreed that Moses did take a journey to heaven anyway, but he did travel between places. So
no, did you say that I agreed that Moses took a journey to heaven?
No,
yeah, you said it was a spiritual journey.
No, I didn't say I agreed for Moses had a journey to heaven. I never said that.
What did you say exactly? I'm sorry if I misquoted you.
What I said was Moses did not travel between the two sacred places on planet Earth.
But you said it was a spiritual journey that Moses did travel on, correct?
I didn't say that. I said what? Okay, now I get it. Because you said Moses traveled to heaven, I said that is a celestial journey. It's not a journey on earth. In the context of what we're trying to understand here.
Okay, but at that time, Al-Aqsa Mosque wasn't even built.
When? It's not about Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's the temple that Solomon built. Solomon's temple.
Yeah, it was in ruins.
That's correct.
It wasn't standing.
Site.
It wasn't standing at the time.
That site of the building that Solomon had built his temple.
Right, but if you read the explanation in the Tafsirs to go along with this, it says that Muhammad went and he saw the walls and the doors and all of this stuff that was there.
You should not go to the Tafsir or the Hadith. You should not go there.
Say that again.
That is the reason why you should avoid or refrain from reading the spurious literature surrounding this event from the Hadith and from the Tafsir.
Oh, so
okay. What about history?
Okay, so
so you don't accept history either?
So he's saying I should avoid that, but it's trying to give us a historical context behind this verse. But I thought most Muslims was, afraid to do actual history, but even you are denying the history of Islam, supposedly that you find outside of the Quran.
No, I'm not denying the history. The history is not necessarily in the tradition. The history, there's alternative sources to history. It's just not the tradition.
Okay, we're going to go back to 364.
Yeah. Okay.
And what did you want to point out specifically about this verse?
Yeah. So the allele that I was trying to point at is here. It says, وَلَا يَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا أَرْبَابًا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ. It says, and we will not consider some of us, the monks and the rabbis, as lords besides God. Okay. So it's the same allele. So what is really happening here is the verse starts off, O Prophet, invite the people of the book, let us come to common terms that we will worship none but God, associate none with him, nor take one another as lords instead of God. So it's trying to tell people or encourage people to disassociate from the rabbinical bias or the bias of the church, and says don't fall victim to the bias or to the prior information that you've learned, but reason well. Let's come and talk about God, our one God, and let's not worship any other entity other than one God. So this is the context. The context is basically people should free themselves from the bias of the rabbis or the priests, and reason for themselves, as they're responsible for themselves. So before God, they have to reason for themselves
Oh, my
as to
bad.
what their position is in God or about God, rather than falling victims to the rabbinical or the priestly bias.
Right. So how would they take them as lords besides Allah?
But if they blindly believe them, like lots of Muslims do the same thing today. They blindly believe some of the scholars to be having got everything correct. For example, Ibn Kathir, they just blindly believe in Ibn Kathir. So that is also like considering lords besides God.
Okay, so I disagree with this brother here, and I have the hadith to back it up. When the Prophet ﷺ was sitting in the masjid, and he told the Jews and Christians, "You take your Lord, you take your priests and rabbis as God." This means, and the Mufassirin give the clear sharh of this hadith, that they changed from halal to haram and haram to halal, from forbidden to jais, to permissible, from permissible to jais. That's why that's what the Prophet said. This is what they do. So again, without the hadith, it's not a clear answer that that they take.
No.
What did you say? What did you say?
John,
Again, you're
I actually
making that
wrote.
up.
I actually read that to him earlier, and he
Okay.
said that he denies that hadith that Ibn Kathir is actually drawn from to formulate this tafsir.
Yeah.
So he's not gonna accept that. This is why we went to 364, because now he's doing Tatwil, or his own interpretation on on that verse, or on that tafsir that Ibn Kathir brought.
Yeah,
But it doesn't mean exactly.
Being, I'm responsible for my own convictions. None else.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah,
will
I
not
agree.
be
Absolutely,
responsible for
brother.
me,
And
or Ibn Kasir will not be responsible for me. I will be responsible for my convictions to God.
so I was wondering, brother. So people who take hadith, are they Muslim according to you or no? According to you and your scholars, or do you have scholars? I've never
Sorry,
met.
can you?
Yeah.
I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you clearly because your voice is low volume. It has
What
low
about now?
volume.
Is it better now? Is it better now?
Yeah, go ahead and rephrase your question, please.
I was saying, so all these scholars who take a hadith and quote a hadith, what are we to you? Are we Muslim or no?
Are they Muslim or no?
Yeah. Are we Muslim? The ones who take hadith. What do you say about people who
The
take
Sunnah of
hadith?
the Prophet, if they take from the
Yeah.
Sunnah.
Yeah, the definition of a Muslim is the one who submits to the authority of Islam. Okay, so technically, you have to be under a Islamic authority, for example, an Islamic government, to be a Muslim, for example, right? But if you're
Not
living outside
really.
of the
What?
domain,
What?
yeah. So if you're living outside of that domain, for example, you're not entitled. I mean, you're not required to be obedient to the Islamic authority because you're living outside of that domain. So what you can be outside of the domain is you can be a mu'min, a believer, okay,
So I'm so sorry. I've never heard this stuff.
But,
No,
but,
no disrespect.
but
I've never heard any of this before.
yeah.
I've never.
As the connotation evolves, and religion becomes culture, people adopt the name of a Muslim, and that's fine. So culturally, people can be Muslim. I have no problem with that. And people who believe in Hadith, of course, they can also be Muslim. No problem with that. People who believe in the Quran can misunderstand the Quranic verses and continue to be Muslims. That's fine, as long as they have open mind, as long as they have the will to seek out the truth, they will remain Muslims.
Okay, just curious, brother. Okay, inshallah. So how are you going to answer the verse without the hadith? You're cooked again.
I don't really understand why you are telling I'm getting cooked, but yeah, ask your question.
He's saying because
Go ahead.
you have no outside evidence for what you're claiming.
Exactly.
The reason why most Muslims hold to the hadiths is because they realize that the Quran doesn't fully explain a lot of the things within the Quran without the hadiths and the tafsirs of the ones that actually studied and went back and read all of the earlier interpretations from the earlier scholars closer to Muhammad, so it can be in line in succession and not contradict each other. Because who's to say that someone like you didn't come along and say, no, this is what this means and this is not what this means. But if you have a uniformity in ideological thoughts and processes, and that actually goes back to the closer to the mouth of Muhammad, then more than likely your probability of understanding these verses are true instead of leaning upon your own interpretation.
I understand the sort of effect that indoctrination can have.
Oh, yeah, y'all indoctrinated, John.
Yeah,
He said, yeah.
That's
correct.
funny.
But in my own studies of the Quran, I've never felt a need to find an alternate source to explain the Quran. I just didn't feel it.
But who gives
I'm very
you
comfortable.
who gives you the authority to do that?
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
God Himself. God is asking me, don't you have the brains to contemplate on my verses? Don't you have the aql, the understanding, the faculty that I gave you? Don't you use it to understand my verses? So I'm saying, yes, my Lord, I'm going to use my faculties that you've given me to understand your verses. And I think I'm doing a great job.
But he also tells you to, Muhammad also says that you have to follow or abide by the people in authority, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And that's the Mufassirs, the
authorities are not the religious authorities. Authorities are the government authoriries.
So
they are not religious authorities.
So like things like Sharia, how do you adhere to Sharia law or the law?
It's the government's job to implement the Sharia law.
Yeah, but
so you have to obey
it, right? But who interpreted the Quran correctly to implement a Sharia derived from these Quranic verses? And how do you know? Because men are fallible, according to you. How do you know that they got these things right?
That is exactly why our legislative systems continually amend things, and they improvise things, and they do a lot of amendments to improve the legislation, right?
So they're not going strictly by the Quran.
Well, we as people are fallible. We can make mistakes. Kings can give or pronounce wrong judgments. Judges can pronounce wrong judgments. It's possible. But as long as there is a will in that society to seek out the truth, that society will remain rightly guided.
But these people are supposed to be rightly guided by Allah and actually explicate, right? And derive
not
derive from no. I'm talking about Sharia right now. How do they pass down laws given the interpretation from the Quran? So if these same people, infallible men, right, that is interpreting these Quranic verses to derive a law from them, how do you know that they are actually doing it correctly? Because they're fallible. They could be not doing it correctly. But then
That's
now,
why,
and
yeah,
then now Allah's govern laws that he wanted to govern the Muslims by is compromised because he linked on fallible men to do so.
yeah, it's the same thing. Ever since even Solomon built the temple, David had a kingdom. As soon as Solomon is gone, Israelites are divided. They disagree on matters, and the kingdom is divided into northern kingdom and southern kingdom. So people always have this tendency to disagree and to differ, but that's just who we are as human beings. At the end of the day, we have our experts. You may call them as scholars or religious scholars, but even they come under the authority of the government officials. So whatever the government officials decide, even scholars, they are under them and they have to obey the government officials. And it's the responsibility of the government to implement the Sharia. So if scholars come up with some differing understanding of legislation from the Quran, ultimately the decision is with the government officials to decide on a course of life, right?
So
So
Sharia can
later
be
on,
so Sharia can be corrupt.
the
God's laws.
legislative,
Let me put this in focus for you. God's laws of how he wanted to govern Muslims can actually be corrupted according to you, since these government officials and everybody are fallible. That doesn't mean that they can actually explicate to the T God's laws, right? So now Sharia can be corrupted, and they're not, you know, executing God's laws to how he wanted them to.
God's laws cannot be corrupted because they are found in the Quran. But people who are interpreting them, can they go wrong? Of course they can go wrong because
Okay,
they are
that's what I'm
fallible.
saying. That they're the ones that's
God's
actually
laws
interpreting these laws from the Quran. So these fallible men that is interpreting these Quranic verses to derive a Sharia law, God's law, out of the Quran, can possibly be doing it wrong because they have their own ambitions, they have their own interpretations, they have their own, things that they want to get done or do. So now Sharia is compromised because it's done by fallible men. Is that what you're saying?
100% correct.
Whoa.
You nailed it.
Oh man, Daniel.
No, 100% correct.
You
nailed it.
don't live in a Muslim country, do you? You're in America, right? I hope
See,
so.
look,
I'm
you
just
nailed-
hope so for your safety, because
It's
if
irrelevant. Look, it's those things are irrelevant. Those things are irrelevant.
No,
When
I'm
we are
just
dealing
saying for your safety, brother. I don't want, because you showing your face. I don't want the wrong, people to see this. And let's be honest, we know how some radicals can be.
Look, my safety is in the hands of the Lord. He will let me live as long as He deems fit that I should have life. And if He permits, someone will kill me, and that'll be it. So I should not compromise my ideals and my values because of being afraid of being killed. I'm a man of knowledge. I mean, I love God. I love knowledge. So what I understand, I have the right to present it. I'm entitled to my understanding. If someone else has better knowledge than me and has the capability of correcting me, I'm open to being corrected.
Right. And I agree with you that you should have your own autonomous mind and things of how you should, conduct your reasoning and how you come to the conclusion of certain things. I'm totally for that, for every man. I don't think that they should be under the thumb of tyrannical dictators or anyone that wants to impose their beliefs or how they interpret on you. And I agree with that. And I think you should. But to be all the way honest, this is not how it works in Islam. For the majority of Islam, that's not how it works. Right. And they would use and they would give me 5 seconds and I'm gonna let you go. And they would use certain Quranic verses, certain passages, certain tafsirs, certain hadiths to actually validate their beliefs on, making you conform to their ideological system, so to say. So if you want to have that framework to where you openly can think for yourself and do these things, you're in the wrong religion. Truthfully, you're in the wrong religion, bro.
Okay, let me say this. Let me answer this. At one point in time, even Christianity had a similar phase where people were persecuted for having a difference of opinion. And no wonder the Islamic world recently underwent or through this phase. From what we saw in the Middle East, things unfolded very badly for them. But it's a phase that has come to Islam now, and it'll go away. It became possible because of the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and we are currently going through a phase of anarchy, just like any other religion previously has. So it's just a phase; it'll pass away, and once things are restored to order, you will again find freedom. People will have freedom to do their to exercise their freedoms and liberties. Once again. So yeah, it's a bad phase, and people don't have a lot of. For what I say specifically, when I'm being particular, is the Salafi Islam that's just come out of Arabia has been very detrimental to Islam, and they have a forceful posture in imparting education to its peoples. It's very incorrect, and it's actually becoming detrimental to the very interests of God, and rightly so. God will punish when people become like that. God will punish. God has punished Jews in the past. He sent them into exile to learn a lesson, and he also punished them when they disbelieved in Jesus Christ. So he let the Romans come and bulldoze them, and he also has
whoa. That's not why.
He has also
That's
bulldozed.
not why. Hold on, Daniel. I gotta stop you. That's not why
finish.
the. But no. That's not why the Romans came to punish Israel, because believing Jesus is Christ. That is not why. That is
Because
actually a prophecy from the earlier prophets that Jesus was the Christ, was the Messiah. Because Christ just means Messiah. You know that, right?
No, can you please let me finish? It's my understanding that Jews were punished in 70 AD because they rejected their Messiah, Jesus Christ. Okay.
Oh,
because of their
rejection. Okay.
Because of their rejection of the Messiah, God punished them in 70 AD, and God has also punished the Muslims in Baghdad. The fall of the Abbasid Caliphate was a punishment from God, and God is currently punishing Muslims big time. In the last 100 years, God has been busy punishing Muslims because of all of these sort of things they do with his book. They disrespect his book, and they sort of force other literature to be authoritative literature over and above the Quran. So that's a punishment that God unleashes upon people when they do such things. Historically, we can see God has punished his chosen ones a lot of times to discipline them. So it's no wonder that the chaos in the Middle East was really a punishment of God, in my understanding. So God does this all the time, and if people don't realize this, they are at loss.
Okay, now let's go back to the topic. Right?
Yeah.
we got way off somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Let's go back to the topic now.
Yeah.
If someone makes something permissible for that was once haram, or made something haram that was permissible, is that a form of shirk?
That what it could be is basically a misunderstanding, people may have misunderstanding about certain things, and they may do certain things not being fully informed. Okay, it is good to start from there. It is good to make a positive assumption of people. Okay, people can go wrong because of misunderstanding, and then comes deliberate doing, right? And that's where it is called as kufr. You are deliberately going against the verses of God, and that's kufr. That's like that contributes to, or that leads you to disbelief in those verses of God.
Okay, so now when we
Shirk
now harkening back, now
Shirk
going
is
back,
basically discretizing the unity of God. So if you discretize the unity of God, that amounts to shirk.
so but going back to 931, what we seen that it says they'll take their rabbis and monks as lords, right? Besides Allah and the messenger Jesus, How, because according to you, men are fallible. How did these rabbis and monks, they probably misunderstood the words of God, right? Is that possible? And then the people followed along?
That's possible.
Right. So, but it was still condemning them. And also, according to Ibn Kathir, this is how they may set up partners with Allah, because they was listening to them through this let's say faulty interpretation of the scriptures, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why God gives us a lifetime to change our position. So that's why it becomes important to go back to the scripture, read again. And just like Jesus said, do not be like sugar to each other, but be like salt to each other. What is a salt that loses its flavor? It's good for nothing. It should be thrown away and trampled under feet. So Jesus says a very important teaching Jesus gives is to be like salt to each other and not be like sugar to each other. So we always have to be self-critical in the religion of God. It's very important. So the moment you drop criticism, you're in trouble with God. So you always have to hold the guard high, and you always have to be open to criticism in God's religion.
Okay. Now, but that didn't stop them, because you can be misinformed and still commit shirk, right?
You can misunderstand and commit minor shirk. Minor shirk.
Mm-hmm.
Major shirk would be identifying other deities besides God.
Shirk Akbar.
Okay, that would be a major shirk, right?
Mhm.
Minor shirk would be not knowing your own desires, misleading you from the path of God. Okay? If your own desires mislead you from the path of God, that is a minor shirk. And God gives you the opportunity, a lifetime, to correct your behavior, to do amendments, and come back to the scriptures and follow them in spirit and essence, rather
Okay.
than following your own desires.
Thank you. So, according to 66:1 in your Quran, verse 66, Surah At-Tarim, verse 1,
Yeah.
says, "O Prophet," this is Allah speaking, "why do you prohibit yourself from what Allah has made lawful to you, seeking to please your wives? And Allah is all forgiving, most merciful."
That's correct.
Okay.
That's why Allah says He's forgiving and merciful.
Right. So that means some form of way, maybe it's minor shirk. Muhammad committed shirk right here, because he made something prohibited. That means haram, that Allah made lawful. Now, whether he did it knowingly or not, he committed shirk right here.
Well, the Quran does not use the phraseology of a shirk there, right?
It doesn't matter. By your own very standards, by your own. Hold on, Daniel. Don't start waffling now. Don't start waffling now. by your very standard that you just set up and by your criteria, whether knowingly or not, Muhammad committed shirk right here.
Now look, when you understand the word shirk in a way removed from the context, right? When you understand the concept of shirk, right? So the Quran says, when you're reading into the concept of shirk, it says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِينَ the Quran goes on to say, I'm forgetting the Arabic, but I'll phrase it in English. The Quran goes on to say, have you seen the one who takes his own desire to be his God? Okay. So the Quran imparts, if a man is pursuing his desires, okay, pursuing his desires, it will lead him to shirk, correct? All right, that's what the Quran says, okay? In this verse, God counsels Prophet Muhammad. He says, why did you prohibit yourself something what Allah has made lawful to you? All right? And Allah says, in order to seek your wives, but Allah is forgiving and merciful. So Allah is counseling Prophet Muhammad on something that he has done, not accordance to the expectations of God. Correct?
So he did something wrong, Daniel, right?
And therefore, that's correct. Therefore, God says to him, God is forgiving and merciful. So what we get to understand from that is, Prophet Muhammad, once he got a notification, right, from God, he wouldn't do it any longer. So he would not pursue his desires to the detriment of obedience to God. He would not do that. Correct?
Right. But I agree. But seeking to please his wives, that was his own pleasures or whatever, he disobeyed Allah. And Allah had to forgive him for it. So what was he being forgiven for? Because you said earlier, by your own, interpretation, this would be minor shirk.
No, look, you have to understand.
Come on, Daniel. Come on, Daniel. Be honest with me now. Be honest with me. This is why. So is Allah forgiving him?
Not just here. Allah forgives Prophet Muhammad in quite a few different places.
Yes, because he was sinning.
No, look, yeah. So every human being is sinful. Every human being is sinful. And that sin really depends on our understanding of what could be a sin, for example. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, not necessarily. We can be sinning and not know it. That doesn't mean we're not sinning just because we're not aware of it. We can still be sinning and not be cognitive or aware that we're sinning.
That is just human for what we are, human being.
And I agree. But your prophet, being the prophet, he knew that this was halal, permissible, and he still went against Allah and made it impermissible for him. Because this right here, you don't even know really the context behind this, since you're Quran only. What did he do? To
you look? Okay, you don't even have to know it. Okay, that's irrelevant. The reason being, it's irrelevant. The reason being, God is giving a directive to Prophet Muhammad. Right? The directive is, whatever God has made halal or permissible, you can't even being a prophet is something different, or being a normal human being is something different. Being a prophet, if a prophet is letting his guard loose and making a statement, it will have implications for people, correct? So being a prophet A prophet's podium is very important, right? For example, a prime
Because other
minister's
people will
podium
follow
today.
suit. I understand what you're saying.
Exactly correct. So a prime minister's podium today is very, very important. Even if he drops a guard and says something, a lot of people listen to it and they do things, right? So that's why it's important. So prophet is being advised here not to lose his guard. Okay? That's what it is. Allah is not saying to the prophet, you have disobeyed me. That's not what Allah is saying to him. Allah is not saying you have committed a shirk. That is not what Allah is saying. Allah is showing him the importance of his utterances. Because he is a prophet of God, he has a higher podium. So whatever he says, he should be mindful. And Allah goes on to say, Allah is forgiving and merciful, and he proceeds. So Allah is not making a point that he committed shirk or he disobeyed him. That's not the point.
Why would Allah say, and Allah is all forgiving and most merciful?
That's correct. So Allah keeps forgiving people as long as they have they're obedient and they're sincere to Him. Allah only does not forgive people who are insincere to Him.
No, but He said, why do you make permissible, right, prohibited, what Allah has made lawful to you? He's made lawful to them. So you can't make something unlawful to you if Allah has already made something lawful to you. So can we come to an agreement that Muhammad did something wrong in this without even really knowing all of the details behind it? We can come to an agreement that Muhammad did something wrong. He made a mistake by this first sentence, right?
Okay, let me say something to you. This is not a public dictation. It's his personal affair, like it's a family affair, like it's domestic to his own house. It's not a directive that he issued in the mosque to all the people, the Muslim people. It's not that. It's a very domestic thing that just occurred in his own family, in his own house. So God says, even there, don't drop your guard. That's what God is saying to him.
So
don't drop your guard.
So he didn't do anything wrong.
Look, God, what I can make out of that is God is telling prophet, as a prophet, whatever you say has implications. So don't drop your guard, even if it is your own house.
So
even if it is your own,
I need a clear yes or no. Did he do anything wrong here?
Personally, I don't deem that to be a wrong thing because he did not issue a public dictation. That's my personal opinion, but that's how God is trying to teach him not to let loose his guard, even if it is his own house.
Let me show you how this is still slippery, what you're saying. Because let's say we know pork is haram. But if Muhammad, as a prophet, say, no, I can eat pork in my house, is he doing something wrong?
Like, can you come up?
Be serious.
No.
Come on, let's be honest.
Can you come up with a better analogy?
No, because that's what it's saying. He made something
because
wrong that was.
You are inverting the case.
No,
you're making. You're having an inverse case of a prohibited item being allowed, but you have to present an analogy of a allowed item being prohibited. That would be a better analogy.
Well, isn't the opposite is true? The opposite is also true. If Allah made a law, made something haram that you permitted, then of course if he made something halal that you made haram, that's also true. The inverse is also true. This is why I brought you an inverse to this, because it is also stand true, because this is coming straight from Allah. So the inverse is also true. If something that you make halal, you make haram, then you can't make something haram that was halal. The inverse is also true.
But I think you can come up with an analogy that better fits the context. by
Well,
providing
you
an
said,
analogy.
well, I built this from you because you said if
Yeah.
it was in the privacy of his own home and it was just domesticated instance, then he didn't share it out to anyone. So he didn't make it a decree, you know, or change it and made it instituted for other Muslims or so for somebody that's following him, right? Then he didn't do anything per se. He didn't do anything wrong. So I just kept it into the confines of his home, right? And the inverse is also true. So if pork is haram and he made it halal for his household, did he do something wrong?
The reason why this analogy can't be true is because there is a deliberation there.
There's
Because
a what?
a deliberate intent to make pork halal is a deliberate intent, okay? But of the items that are halal, there are numerous items that are halal. For example, the Prophet could have said, "Oh, I don't want to eat olive oil," for example, or I don't want to eat dates, for example, right?
Yeah, but he's not making it haram. That's just a preference.
That's a possibility. That's a possibility.
Right,
If the
but we're
Prophet would
talking
have
about
dates.
Daniel, I know what you're saying. That's just a preference. Of course, you can prefer not to do something, but you can't say it's prohibited. This is what Muhammad did. Said it was actually prohibited for him to do
That's
this.
not the case. That is not the case.
Can you read the Arabic? Can you say? Can you show me?
You know, when the Arabic says, the Arabic uses the word haram, right? Tuharrimu is haram, right?
Yeah.
Prohibition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Allah is telling, Ya ayyuhan nabi, O Prophet, lima tuharrimu, why do you prohibit to yourself? So it's not a directive that Prophet is telling his wives, you are prohibited to eating dates. That's not what is being alluded to, what is being implied to. What God is saying, O Prophet, lima tuharrimu, why do you prohibit yourself? Ma ahallallah, what Allah has made lawful to you. So you can eat whatever Allah has permitted to you. Don't prohibit yourself from eating something or drinking something, correct? So that's what is implied. The Prophet is not giving a directive to his wives in a domestic setting, nor is he giving a directive in a public setting. Okay, so a public setting directive will be a prohibition. Even domestically, if he is prohibiting his wives from eating something, that would be a prohibition. But the Prophet is not doing that. Okay, so the Prophet is expressing his preference, and God is saying, don't even do that. Don't let your guard down, because whatever you do has implications. So that's the meaning that's being shown to us in this verse.
Okay, see, I think you're trying to oversimplify what this verse is saying. And
I'm telling you,
hold on, Daniel. I didn't cut you off. And you are also saying, just because he didn't make it a declaration or to other people, then that's not something wrong. He didn't do something wrong. So that's why I kept it strictly to Muhammad with my example that I gave you in his household, because the laws of Allah is for everyone. It's for everyone. Just because you're inside or outside in America or in Egypt or Lebanon, no matter what, the rules are the rules. So you can't restrict it and just say, hey, just because I'm gonna just let me show you exactly what he's talking about. Well, you don't take the Tafsir or the what's the name. So just looking at this verse, right, he still sought the approval of his wives above something that Allah actually made permissible for him. So it's not just the simple fact that he made something prohibited, right, over something that was permissible. It's because he was looking to please his wives. Now, this third party is what comes into it, and this is why it's analogous with 931. 931, the Christians, right, took their rabbis and their monks, because this the third party that was enacted upon to make it now be shirk, because now they're actually taking their right rules and regulations over Allah's. So it's not like they just, just simply didn't want to refrain from doing things. They took the interpretations of their rabbis and their monks, and they made them, elevated them over Allah. Just like in this situation, he sought to please his wives, another third party. He elevated their what they wanted over their gratification over Allah's. So this is why this is super analogous, no matter the context now, because now we know the third party is what makes this shirk. Minor shirk or major shirk, this is shirk. And you admit, and this is, I think you're trying to weigh on different scales when it comes to this passage than in 931, because you agreed with me in 931 about, what they was doing, and also in 364 that you brought up.
Okay, you are thinking it to be super analogous, but I believe not to be the case, and I believe you're inflating it out of proportion for the reason that this occurring in the Prophet's house was not detrimental to anybody, but what the religious people among the Jews and the Christians did over the centuries had been detrimental to lots of people. So on those scales, you can imagine how this is not disobedience of God and how this is not the kind of shirk that you're trying to allude to.
Yeah, but now you're just bringing some arbitrary standard now. We're
No,
talking about
I'm-
just the principle of the matter. Just going off
just
of the
as-
principle. Hold on, not
I'm
saying
done.
that, not even if it affected anyone else. Just like me, right? If I do certain things that's damaging to myself, that fundamentally goes against God's commandments, I'm hurting myself, but it's still going against, I'm still sinning and I'm doing something wrong because now I'm doing it myself. Let's just say like smoking or, eating pork. Since in this context, you're Muslim. So if I only eat pork for myself, I'm still doing something bad in the eyes of God, because he told me specifically not to do this. Right. And then let's just say like more analogous for Muslims. You're permitted to wed 4 wives. You know what I'm saying? I don't know about you if you hold to that, because you don't take from the Tafsir or the Hadiths. So, but Muslims generally are permissible to have 4 wives. Now, that's
the Quran.
Okay, yeah. So that's my legal right as a Muslim, right, from Allah. But if I say no, I'm only going to marry 1 wife, and having 3 other wives now is haram. It isn't permitted at all for me. Now I have just made myself a God, and I just went directly against what Allah says. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not telling anyone else, but me specifically, I'm breaking a rule, a commandment that Allah gave me to do, or made it permissible for me to do. So it was halal, now I made it haram. It's impermissible, right? So I'm still doing something wrong. Wouldn't you agree?
There is something called as discretion in the things that are allowed to you, right? So even if you're allowed to marry 4 different women, you can have your discretion not to marry, and that in itself is not wrong. Okay,
I know,
so,
but in my example, I said that it was permissible, but now I'm saying it's haram. It's prohibited. Not that I'm just going to refrain from doing it.
What if you did not say it?
Say that again.
What if you did not say it?
If I didn't say what?
Like you did not prohibit it.
It don't matter if I'm
Like,
so. Don't, Allah doesn't know what I'm thinking.
yeah, He knows. That's what it is.
Yeah. So
So the
even
thing
if I'm
is,
thinking it's prohibited, I'm still doing something wrong because Allah knows my inner thoughts. He knows everything that I'm thinking, everything that I'm going to do here from to eternity or my
what
whole
if
rest of my
what
life.
if what if you have not thought about it to be prohibited?
I would have to think about it to make something prohibited.
No, you just made a preference not to marry more women. You were happy with one, and you said, "Oh, I'm not going to have more marriages," without saying it's prohibited. You just exercised your preference, your
Exactly.
discretion.
And I never said that that was wrong.
And that's exactly what Prophet has done. He has
No, he made
exercised
it prohibited.
his preference, and but God uses those terms to counsel him. Like, you are a prophet, so whatever you say, putting your guard down will have implications. So don't do it. So that's how
what did
God
it
is
say right
addressing
here?
him.
What did it say? What do those
The Quran does
what
not
does those four
say,
words say right there for me, please?
but what is the word after that? Yourself.
No,
Yourself
no
is the word.
worries, no worries, no worries, no worries. What does this say? He prohibited,
Why
right?
do you prohibit yourself?
So he made haram, correct?
Yourself. That's a
Doesn't
preference.
matter. Doesn't matter. We already got the baseline that doesn't matter if I'm doing something to myself that's still going against the commandments of Allah. I'm still doing something wrong. So no matter if it's to himself or to anyone else, he's doing something wrong. So right here it says, why do you prohibit? Not that why do you prefer not to do this? It says he
Okay.
prohibited.
Okay, I agree with you on that bit, and would go on to conclude that it is not analogous to listening to rabbis or the rabbis teaching people wrong things. Those are completely two different things. So giving out dictations to other people, having an influence on them, is completely different from the context and connotations implied in this verse, which was very personal to Prophet Muhammad himself.
All right, brother. I think we're going in around in the circles right now, and I appreciate you for coming up, Prophet Daniel. I'm gonna go ahead and
okay.
move to the next guest. So I appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, I just want to have a small little chat here with you that I'm looking forward to having discussions with you, perhaps on your channel or on my channel. So would you be willing to do that on lots of different important subjects?
Sure.
Okay, so
Like, what do you have
can I
in
have,
mind? What do you have in mind?
like, I'm basically focused on fighting atheism. My last 12 years, I have actually done a lot of work to debunk atheism and the claims of the atheists. So I have a very in-depth sort of archive in me that I've developed over a period of 12 years in the past, having dealt with atheists full time.
So are you extending me and to come on your thing to talk about atheism and try to combat atheism with you?
Yeah, that's I welcome that. If you want me to do it on your channel, or if you want to come on my channel and we can do it, we can do this collectively. That'll be something that I would be looking forward to, and also I would be looking forward to developing cordial relations with the Christian community, because I'm of the opinion that Muslims and Christians have to collaborate. It's happened in the past, it can happen in the future, and it can happen now, rather than trying to pull each other down. We can discuss evidence for sure. We can. Nothing of this should stop us from having a discussion about whether Prophet Muhammad was a true prophet or not, whether the Quran is accurate or not. None of that precludes any of these things. But at the same time, we can have cordial relations to the benefit of God's religion,
No,
and we can
like
explore.
I understand what you're saying, and I think
Yeah.
because you think we're both theists, that we should unite on a front to combat atheism. And I see what you're saying, and I don't think that'll be very wise, because you don't believe I have the right God, and I don't believe you have the right God, right?
No, that's incorrect.
No,
I do
I
believe
don't.
that you have the right God. We have so much in common. There's nothing in common between any two groups as it is between Christians and Muslims. Muslims and Christians have a lot in common. In fact, there is no other religion in the world that believes that Jesus to be the Messiah, but Islam is the only religion in the world, even a religion that has come after Islam, for example, Sikhism, that's come after Islam, does not believe in Jesus to be the Messiah from God. But Islam is that only religion that believes, that makes it an article of faith, that Jesus is the Messiah. If nobody can be a Muslim or a mu'min, a believer, without having believed that Jesus was the Messiah. So that's how the religion of Islam is actually friendlier to Christianity, and there's a lot common between these two religions than any other example that you can find in the
Right.
world.
But I will make
Yeah.
the argument that you don't have the right Jesus, first of all, right? And you don't know why he's called the Messiah. Because if you did, then you yourself will reject Jesus as the Messiah. Matter of fact, you reject Jesus as the Messiah every day. Once you say that Jesus isn't God, then you reject him as your Messiah. Because given the context from the previous scriptures and what we know the Messiah is to be, the Messiah is to be God in the flesh, because he is the only one that can redeem us from ourselves, right? And he is the only one that can actually defeat the Antichrist, is God himself. So I enjoy talking to you, you know what I'm saying? And I think we can have some more deeper theological discussions between me and you first before we try to, team up against atheists, because I think there's a lot of things fundamentally between our two religions that just don't mesh, right? I think it's more because let's say we get an atheist that want to convert and he's up in the air. Then I'm going to start trying to pull them to Christianity. You're going to start trying to pull them to Islam. Then fundamentally, we're going to, I know, but I'm just saying in a hypothetical, we're going to start.
No, you're getting a wrong idea. You're having a very wrong idea of what my beliefs are. Okay, I believe salvation is possible for a Christian, possible for a Jew, possible for a Muslim, and also possible for someone who is non-Abrahamic. So salvation is possible and open for all human beings as long as they believed in God and did the right thing.
But I
So
believe Jesus is God.
So you don't have to be a Muslim, you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be a Jew to attain salvation.
But I believe Jesus is God, Daniel.
Yeah, that might be a point that we can talk about, and sort of.
That's a big point. That's a big point. This is why we don't.
Are you open to the possibility that you could be wrong?
If no.
And if that is your premise, then you're actually shutting down the possibility of discourse and dialogue. Don't you think so?
No. Because we can always have discourse and dialogue. That just doesn't mean I'm gonna convert away from my fundamental beliefs. That's like I don't automatically assume.
But do you have evidence for your fundamental beliefs? Are your fundamental beliefs based on convincing evidence?
Sure, it is.
Okay, then you should be able to
That's what
articulate
Christianity
that
is
evidence.
all about. Christianity is about evidence. We don't believe. Hold on, so you can understand where I'm coming from. We don't believe our book is true just because our book says so. We don't believe that what we have in our hands is the truth just because off of blind faith. The historical events that actually backs up our beliefs. This is why we believe that is logical and that is true, right? Because if Jesus was actually crucified, which history says he was actually a real person that was crucified, right? And once he was crucified, he did resurrect from the dead. There's no body, and then the fundamental facts the four minimal facts argument will lead you to the conclusion that the resurrection is the only plausible thing that could have happened with his body, right? You as a Muslim, I'm not sure if you believe that that you believe that he was crucified or not. I assume that you don't, because you hold to the Quran. But without any even using my Bible, I can show and demonstrate that historically, through historians and then through contemporary people of the time, that Jesus was crucified. That's a fundamental fact of history. Matter of fact, Bart Ehrman and all of these other atheists that does like textual criticism or history, or, you know, looking back at antiquity, verifies that Jesus was a real person and he was in fact crucified. They say that is the most documented part of his whole life, since we have contemporary outside sources through Romans and through Jewish and Josephus that this person actually was crucified, right? So that's a fundamental fact of history. Now, once we go and do the minimal facts arguments about the empty tomb and how no one can possibly steal the body or this and that, then we break down that the resurrection is the only plausible thing that could have happened. So if Jesus actually resurrected, that means that he was, and he, whatever he preached about, him being the Son of God and dying on a cross and all of this that he preached about in our gospels, is actually verifiable because God saw it fit, right, to raise him from the dead. That means he's not only verified through history, but also God himself verified him by raising him from the dead. And this is a way that we can know that Jesus was who he said he was. He you know, he's not the Isa of the Quran.
Okay. Look, obviously there are some disagreements about certain things between us, but that should that preclude our collaboration? Do you think a Christian? I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the first century Christians and the Ebionite movement and the Nazarene Church. How the Ebionites did not really believe in the crucifixion of Jesus, but still they were Christian people. Okay. I don't know what you think about these things, or your depth of understanding of these things. But on the outset, if someone does not believe in Jesus to have been crucified, is that equivalent of disbelief in God?
Yes, because I don't know if you know this or not, the Ebionites held solely to the book of Matthew, right? This was their book. They didn't believe that he was divine, you know, or so to say, or they didn't believe that he was born of a virgin. They believed in something called adoptionism, that at his baptism, he became divine. You know, he wasn't there from the beginning like us Christians believe, but they held to the book of Matthew as their text that they held to. And we all know, if you read Matthew, in the book of Matthew, he was crucified. So they did believe he was crucified. They didn't believe he was born of a virgin or something like that, but they did believe in the crucifixion.
So which of the beliefs would be detrimental if a Christian does not believe in the virgin birth, and there's another Christian who does not believe in the crucifixion? So among these two people, who have disbelieved?
They're both disbelievers.
Okay, but a person who does not believe in the virgin birth may believe in crucifixion, and vice versa. So which one is equivalent to disbelief in God?
Yeah, but you can't cherry pick the scriptures like that, because if we look back in Isaiah 7:14, Isaiah 9:6, Isaiah 53, Isaiah 52, 53, Isaiah 60, all of these talk about the suffering Messiah and everybody and what he was going to do and how he was going to suffer for the sins of humanity. How you doing, Adnan? Give me a second, brother. So there's no way that you cannot believe in the virgin birth and also the crucifixion, because the one prophet Isaiah encapsulates all of it. Isaiah is considered as the fifth gospel. I don't know if you know that or not, because of what he predicted that the Messiah, who the Messiah was going to be, where he was going to come from, how he was going to die, resurrect. Isaiah encapsulates it all. So if they don't believe in either one of them, then they're just cherry picking the verse, the scriptures, and they're holding to counter beliefs, believing that this Messiah can be crucified but not also be born of a virgin. It's contradictory in their worldview, because that's the same person that was supposed to be crucified.
Okay, I'm looking forward to more discussions between you and me, and whenever you're available, if you want to share your email with me here on the private chat, I'll collect it and I'll get in touch with you on email, so we can sort of agree on the topics that we can discuss on. And I'm looking forward to those times. And thank you for having me here. And if you want to permit me, I would just shout out my channel to listeners.
Go ahead.
If listeners want to come and listen to what I produce on Prophet Daniel Has Spoken on YouTube, so you're most welcome to do that. And thanks again, and I'm looking forward to your email. If you can just put it in private chat here, that'll be wonderful.
All right, I got it back in the private chat for you, bro.
Yeah, thank you so much. Your name? I didn't get your name. I'm sorry.
Oh, they call me Word. I'll
the
give
Word.
you
Okay.
my real name off. I don't,
Okay, that's fine. So have a good day, and God bless.
God bless you, bro.
Bye.
Bye. All right, Adnan, you're on stage. How you doing?
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Salam alaikum.
Hello. Are you Christian?
Yes, I'm Christian.
Okay. Okay.
I can barely hear you. Can you come closer to your mic?
Okay. Okay. I'm closer to my mic. So, what are you? What's your topic on that?
Did Muhammad commit shirk?
No. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, doesn't done any shirk.
Let me see if I can raise your mic up. You sound low. No, I can't give you. Okay, he just left. I don't know what that was about. He just left. So if any other Muslim out there that want to come up, the link is pinned at the top of the chat. I guess he didn't want to defend Muhammad committing shirk, and that's okay. He just burnt out. He's like, okay, I don't even want to talk to you about that. I don't even want to talk to you about that. I'm gonna just exit stage right, so it is what it is, man. It is what it is. Let's go back to the all right, look like I'm gonna have to jump over on TikTok. Appreciate the super chat, Cody. Appreciate the super chat, Omar, as well. Cody, I don't see you left a message. I don't see a message. I mean, that guy, he's Prophet Daniel, he's cordial for the most part. I think he's is life on right now, y'all? I thought I seen somebody say life was on YouTube right now. Let me see. Oh, life is on YouTube. Life is on YouTube, y'all. Should I hop over and join life? Should I hop over and join my boy life? Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna hop over and join live. All right, how I'm gonna do this? Okay. World Jingleheimer Smith. Oh man, that ain't my name, Tina. That ain't my name. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end this one. I'm gonna go ahead and end the live, y'all. Is not, Tina. It is not my name. I'm gonna go ahead and jump over and end this one. I'm gonna jump over on life. I'll see y'all over on lives. When y'all get to life, y'all say word sent me. All right, y'all say word sent me. I'm come from Words Live. Go over to God Logic 2.0 and I'll see y'all over there. God bless y'all and good night.
Yeah. Watch your head down, yeah. Watch your head. Watch your head down. Just get. Watch your head. Watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. Watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Watch your head. Man, ain't no way I'm finna listen to you spit with your PDF supporting eye. For you finna get clip, idiot. Poses wise when truth approach you, close your eyes. Hold the lies and show your pride is oversized in your replies. Trying to teach, but you only came to preach. Lying about Jesus, who you think you finna reach. In your speech I hear the weakness, that's why you won't shut up. Demons in your ear convince you to be evil is what you disagree. It's history, too late to change it, it's a thing. Wins ain't free round here, bro. When you speak I'm listening. So if you think you finna be hitting me with your wizardry, convincing me to give a free platform, you're tripping, G. I don't mince words, I don't get purrs who don't deserve the way. Why don't you learn? You've shown you've earned it, so deserve your fate and so discern what happened here, so you learn your place. I know it burned, but grow and turn from falsehood into grace. Watch your head down, yeah. Watch your head, watch your head, watch your head down. Just get. Watch your head, watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Just pay close attention, that hateful ambition is why you done failed your mission. Your faith is a prison that makes you a victim, that's why you ain't breaking my rhythm. You ain't finna get in, my spirit is sealed. Don't know your God, can't say if it's real. To me he sound awful like Satan for real, trying to convince me he made us to kill. What are you stupid? This is the war of the spirit, but you don't know it or walk it or live it. You don't see what's happening, you're walking into it. You're there where it matters and lost and diluted. You can give pain, you can give hate, but don't wanna take it. That is your way, you will give hate because you love Satan. I'm not finna pause my day to listen to someone whose Lord is hate. I'm finna walk away. Yeah. Whoa. Watch your head down, yeah. Watch your head. Watch your head. Watch your head down. Just get. Watch your head. Watch your head. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Get out of here, man.